There ain't no refining getting done in this episode, because everybody's a little bit too busy getting... Okay, cut to this time period if you want to hear my wackiest theory about what's going on. Completely off the wall and ridiculous. Hello everyone, my name is Michael, and Severance Season 2, Episode 6 has just dropped, and this one is all about the murkiness of romantic relationships between all of the different characters. But before I get into that, I did want to talk a little bit about Milch and Miss Wong. I had been on board with the Miss Wong as a robot train for quite a while, especially because of that weird human-sized box or crate that was in Milch's room in episode 1. But I'm beginning to pull back a little bit on that now. It'd still be kind of neat if she was a robot, but the way Milch talks to her, he does seem like she is a human being that is not following just a program, but may actually be working for the Myrtle Egan School for Girls, and this has become some weird part of progressing along the chain of the Lumen Religion/company.
You cannot graduate from this fellowship until I have deemed you wintertide material.
Milch calls it a fellowship that she's doing, which can have a bunch of different meanings, including a fellowship in a corporation, which is the more normal sense that we would think of nowadays. But I was also thinking about Christian fellowship and various religions where people have to go out into the world and try to engage and socialize and comfort and bring spiritual succor to other members of the faith. What exactly the winter tide thing they're talking about is so tantalizing, but as far as I could tell, there's no evidence yet about what that is. We're probably gonna find out what that is later on in the season, but it's another watery, cold name. With the humoral/tempers theory, winter is represented by water and cold, which is related to dread or fear. I'm not exactly sure why that's the one they're going with. I feel like they may want to, like, why are they going with the water one and not with, the dread seems like something you wouldn't want. You would want to go with maybe frolic. From the previous episode, Milch now knows that Miss Wong had to have been the person who anonymously informed on him, which is a very, why do it anonymously when you only have one coworker? Like, it's obvious he's going to figure that out, or maybe she wanted him to figure that out to kind of like push or intimidate him. And she even wants to feel like somehow she's going to take over his job, like Milch took over Cobell's job, but that just seems ridiculous. But would Lumen put a child in charge of this? I mean, they made it her, like, assistant manager to a floor, so maybe they would make her a full manager. I don't know how they do that, but Milch seems to be going through some sort of severe mental crisis. Back in season 1, I felt that Harmony Cobell was pretty severely mentally ill based on a lot of the things that she did and said, impersonating another person, creating a whole new life, stalking Mark, screaming, yelling, throwing things, breaking into punishment songs for some reason. And Seth seems to be going insane himself. In the first season, he seemed a little bit more together, and he may be realizing that you should be careful what you wish for, because you just might get it. He wanted to be the manager of the floor and get rid of Cobell, but now that he is, his mental health is severely deteriorating. He is especially enraged at that comment that was made about paper clips being installed front to back. I never even knew that you could consider that possible. Strangely, Milch seems to be doing to himself the same kind of word repetition torture that he was forcing people in season 1 to do. And he's actually just repeating it over and over again to himself until he actually means it. I'm still very hopeful that he is actually going to turn against Lumen at some point, maybe like Harmony Cobell already has, but he could go either way, standing on the edge of a knife, and he could go into being a full villain and completely destroy any sense of soul he has at the instigation of the company, or he could turn against it and become a good guy. I'm really hoping for the latter, because I do like him as a character, Tillman is an amazing actor. He's incredible. He does such a great job moving between eerie, patriarchal smiling and intimidation and cruelty and inner sadness and ambivalence about his role as a black man in this company after receiving those paintings. He's just doing a great job. But with Milchik busy doing his own self-torture or something, the Innies are free to do basically whatever they want. This is their greatest opportunity yet in the entire series to just try to explore the severed floor and get down into the testing floor.
Okay, well, I still have a hall pass, so I can go to the break room now, and then we can start after lunch.
Maybe.
Maybe. Did everyone sever their balls in the elevator this morning?
They could go down there, but all three of them get distracted by their personal relationships. And I think that's a good contrast. The Innies are working towards their own emotions and feelings and desires, whereas Milchik is trying to cancel those out, to tame his tempers inside of his own body. And the scene where Dylan goes off with his wife there is kind of, it's this wonderful balance that the show does of a mixture of creepy but also sweet and sentimental, and that duality there that they have. Because back in season 1, I remember that Dylan made a passing comment about wanting to, he's sure that his Outie sleeps with a lot of hot MILFs, but he feels bad for the husbands. But unfortunately for him, he found out in this, well, he didn't find out yet, but in this season, it turns out that he is cheating with hot MILFs, but he's cheating on himself. He is the husband that he feels sympathy for and the cheater simultaneously, because he gets closer and closer with his wife. And this must be a common feeling for a lot of people in long-term relationships that go on for 10 or more years, let's say, where you kind of wish that you could go back to those halcyon days of being truly in love, falling in love with another person, and everything is fresh and new and is not burdened by years and years of contentions, I guess you could say, between the two. And it's a safe little space for Gretchen, who seems to not really feel in love with her husband anymore, the Outie version of Dylan. And we don't know exactly why that is. We can guess that it's because he's not exactly frugal with money, that he is always testing out new weird ideas, like making homemade beer in his garage at one point, or going scuba diving and just blowing through money instead of saving it for their kids. But with Innie Dylan, we have someone who doesn't need to worry about money at all, is completely innocent of a lot of these self-interested drives that Outie Dylan has, and is just absolutely in love with Gretchen. Clearly, you could see it on his face, how much he loves her. And she's reveling in that and wants to enjoy going back. But, going back to that earlier phase of her relationship is clearly going to be destructive. And I'm sure that Outie Dylan is not going to be happy. I assume he is somehow going to find out about this, that she is at the very least emotionally cheating on him. And they did share a kiss this time, not just a hug. So, maybe it's going a little farther. We don't know what's going to happen. But Dylan is presumably going to have a come to Jesus or come to Kier moment where he decides, I have to choose between helping the Innie resistance or spending time with my family. That's what this whole episode is about. Like I said, it's about personal wants and wishes getting in the way of politically fighting back against this evil corporation, which is something that the Innies didn't necessarily have to deal with as much in the first season, because they were, I think Ben Stiller said that they were more like children in the first episode. So they weren't, they may have been naive and a bit selfish, but they didn't have these powerful emotional connections with other people, like romances and marriage and children, to get in the way of their rebellion against Lumen. Mark and Helly, this really seemed to confirm what I said about the last episode, that turning them against each other for one episode and having them fight was just sort of artificial and unnecessary, because we begin this episode with Helly and Mark working together again. They're not split and angry and calling each other assholes or anything. They're willing to work together a bit. And all that stuff about Mark not wanting to talk about what happened with him and Helena is just, it's ended immediately, because that's one of the first things he says to Helly.
We shared vessels.
What's that?
Well, we had sex.
Okay.
I assume he got this vessels thing from the handbook. Like, that sounds like something Keir would say to describe sex, that they shared vessels or something. But it's cute and kind of emphasizes the naivete of the people inside. And we get a really sad tearjerker of a scene where Helly realizes what happened and... But amazingly, whereas other people may have been broken by this information and really turned against Mark, I think that she is clever enough to immediately realize that this is a tactic that Helena is using. And she's going to try and immediately resist. Well, not immediately, she goes through the process, but then she's actually able to put herself back together, because she's just a heroic character who is able to compartmentalize that and put it aside and start fighting back against Helena. Unfortunately, though, they're not really fighting back against Lumen, because they don't go off to find the testing floor. Helly decides that she wants to have Mark to herself and sort of cleanse the timeline between the two by not getting rid of what happened with Helena, but adding something new there between the two of them.
No, I don't want her memory.
Okay.
I want my own. Would you like that?
Yeah, I'd like that.
And so instead of doing work, they scuttle off to one of the disused office areas that we saw in the first season and decide to have a very sweet and romantic and innocent sort of adolescent love scene between the two of them. And they are admittedly not focused on fighting Lumen, but they are creating a powerful emotional bond, or strengthening the existing emotional bond between the two of them. And I think that that is probably going to help them out in the future. Weirdly enough, the way that Helly describes her feelings, she seems jealous of Helena's interactions with Mark. And I wondered for a second, is she doing this because she really wants to do it with Mark? Or is it merely a way to get back at Helena? Because Helena was also jealous of her Innie. So they're both behaving in the same way with the same emotions. And that's kind of eerie, because they're both, in a way, could be interpreted as using Mark in order to further their conflict with each other, not necessarily their own inner feelings. That's a very cynical way of interpreting things, I admit, and I don't fully agree with it, but it is a way of looking at what happened. Everyone on the show seems to be kind of half in and half out of the Innie world. They have one foot in one place, and their loyalties and identity itself are divided between these two types. Whereas in the first one, it was much more clearly separated. But the severance process, everyone, not just Mark, but everyone is kind of integrating through their actions and feelings and behavior and acting based on things going on both in the inside and outside world. And speaking of reintegration, Mark is going through a weird, continuing the weird process of time seemingly not functioning in a way that is comprehensible to the standard human mind.
I'm at Lumen. What?
What?
Fuck, I was just...
Mark?
Because he's not just remembering things, it feels to him like he's experiencing something that happened, like a flashback, or a hallucination that is going on in the present. So he can't tell what's a memory and what's reality. And his cavalier attitude about reintegration is kind of wavering here a bit, because he's recognizing how painful and bizarre and the existential crisis he's going through at this time is not something, it's not trivial. It's very scary and very serious and could possibly lead into his death. He also seems to be kind of starving himself somehow, like that's part of the reintegration process. He's just taking ginger shots or something. I don't know why that would be part of it. Why not having a full stomach? Like, what does digestion have to do with it? I don't know, maybe nothing. But Mark actually goes out to eat at a Chinese restaurant and decides to scoop up the rice with his hand, which seems like very bad manners, but whatever. And he's met there by Helena. And again, yes, another nail in the coffin for good Helena theory, because she is very nasty and creepy during this interaction. First, why is she there? She must be following him to know that he's there, which I'm sure Lumen is following all these people on the outside, but the daughter of the CEO is literally following him around. And it's hard to get a read on exactly what she's doing there. She does seem to be fascinated with Mark, like she actually wants to pursue some kind of relationship with Mark. And I was wondering, maybe this could feed into the good Helena theory, because if it's discovered, as it surely would be, by Lumen that she's having a child with an Innie, that could be considered something that would get her thrown out of the company permanently. So she feels that maybe this is a way for her to escape the oppressive control of her evil father in the company by doing something that they would find unforgivable. So maybe, again, maybe something's there if Helena is pregnant, as a lot of people are theorizing. I kind of think that has to be true, because it just seems like such a good moment for them to end the season on, maybe, that she's pregnant with Mark. I was going to say Mark's Innie, and she goes over and starts flirting with Outie Mark. And that was, oh God, Helena, that was so creepy. Why are you doing that? And we also found out that Helena, as Irving said, is cruel.
And I know you've already been through so much with losing your wife and all. Hannah.
Gemma.
Right, Gemma. Sorry.
Which is understandable in a way, because she's been raised in this evil cult corporation, and so she always goes for the jugular, because that's all she knows. She thinks that is what social interactions are. You try to assert dominance over another person in the cruelest way possible, which is very creepy considering Helena's predatory behavior on Innie Mark. I don't know why she would do that other than to be nasty and cruel, unless she's trying to jog his memory about something. I'm not sure about that, but it just seems like she's trying to hurt him, because that's all she knows. Mark at first seems a little bit interested in Helena, as actually willing to flirt with her. Maybe Helena is actually interested in finding out whether love transcends the Innie-Outie process, the Severance process. I mean, maybe maybe it could transcend those worlds. I don't know. She's trying to figure that out. But eventually Mark gets really creeped out by Helena, and it's not exactly clear why. She almost seems like she wants him to go for a kiss. The two, like, what is Helena feeling here? I can't quite get a read on her. Maybe he can sense something. Some impression has been made on his emotions on a subconscious level that are not related to his experiential memory, and he flees the scene, which is probably for the best, because he doesn't want to get too close to Helena, I hope. What if they end the season with Helena and Outie Mark being in a relationship, and Helly and Innie Mark being in a relationship simultaneously, like a quadruple? I mean, that would be, I can't even fathom how that would work out emotionally between all these people. But Mark eventually goes back to Reghabi. He has a change of heart and decides, at this point, for the first time, I was actually kind of suspicious of Reghabi, because I never was up until this very episode. When I first saw Reghabi, I assumed that she must be some sort of ally and as part of like an anti-Lumen rebel group, like a militant wing of the Whole Mind Collective or something. And she was converted from within. I think about Total Recall a lot when I'm watching this, because it also has stuff about erasing memories and planting memories, an evil guy becoming a good guy. Are you, as Quato said, are you what you do? And does it matter what you did in the past if you're a different person now? But it's just something to chew over. But I was kind of creeped out about how cavalier Reghabi seemed about performing this dangerous brain surgery on Mark. There's some great body horror stuff that was here that I think they should have more of this in the show, where they kind of like crack open his skull, and they decide to try to continue the reintegration process by flooding the chip. And I don't know what they mean by that. Do they mean like just putting regular water around the chip in his brain? Because if so, why does water do that? It's more water symbolism somehow. But maybe I was just being paranoid, but her obsession with getting this done through very dangerous means made me think that maybe Reghabi is not who we think she is. Maybe she's doing this because she is the corporate spy who's working for another company that's trying to destroy the severance process and, show, and maybe another company could figure out how to reintegrate people, that they could cause a severe crisis in the Lumen company. Or maybe she's working for the government, because a severed person would be an incredible spy. You could kidnap someone from another country, sever them, and then put the new person in their place to gather information. So maybe I'm wrong about this, and I still hope Reghabi is a good person, but I was a little bit weirded out by her in this episode, and was becoming more suspicious, because I'm trying to figure out why she's basically putting her life in danger by doing this. What interest does she have in destroying Lumen? Because it feels like it should be more personal than merely a political rebel or insurgent group trying to fight back against Lumen. But she also has this really interesting look on her face when doing the procedure, and I don't know if I've ever seen her look like this, because usually she's kind of staid and unemotional, or if she is emotional, it could be like anger, but here she seems for the first time to really be feeling fear. She's actually terrified, more so than she was when she killed the security chief in the last episode. She's much more frightened about what she's doing to Mark and what could happen to him as a result of it. So I couldn't quite parse that with my paranoid view that maybe she's kind of self-serving or even evil. The world is made even more confusing when Outie Irving finally goes to meet Burt's Outie for dinner. And this brings up a lot of weird questions about severance and duality and the afterlife, which I was not expecting. I was also never really concerned that Outie Burt might be evil, because I was exclusively aware of Innie Burt. So I was just picturing him as this sweet old man that was, kind of lovable, and we all wanted to see him succeed. But as we know with Helena and Helly, sometimes the person on the outside can very much be evil. I'm not quite certain if Burt is still working for Lumen or not, because we learn so many things here it's hard to keep track of. Irving goes over there and meets Burt's husband, Fields, who I was shocked to find out is played by Dr. Bishop from Fringe, the show that I mentioned in the last episode. Maybe that's just another fun little reference there. Burt and Field's house is really weird looking, because there's actually a shot with like 1 million pepper shakers on top of a cabinet that is, if that represents something, I don't know. I know that last episode Milch mentions sugar and salt. I don't remember if they mentioned pepper. There's also a really creepy painting there, and there's more references towards maybe sin eaters or sacrificial lambs, where someone symbolically takes upon themselves the sins of others in order to cleanse a person or a community. Because we learn in this dinner that Burt apparently considers himself something of a villain.
And I should mention that I've been what you might call a scoundrel in my younger days.
to put it mildly.
A scoundrel even. I thought it was kind of cute that he also uses old-fashioned type words to describe a criminal, like Irving also uses the word mountebank, so they're kind of linked in that way. Unfortunately, Irving doesn't press Burt at this time about what his exact villainy was. Apparently, according to Burt and his husband, they feel it was so extreme that there is no way that Burt is ever going to get into heaven afterwards, which is pretty serious, because they're not curists, or whatever you want to call them, luminists. They're Christians, and most of the time, on most sins, you can find some sort of forgiveness according to Christian doctrine. So I don't know why he would feel that he was never going to get into heaven. I strongly suspect that Burt was involved in creating the severance process. I don't think it was just James Egan that made it, because that's not how scientific breakthroughs work. It's teams of dozens or hundreds of people over years, and Burt may have been one of the scientists that helped create severance, and that's the sin that he feels that he's never going to recover from. He created a process that he realizes being used for suffering and evil. And maybe he feels that the only way that he could ever atone for this is by joining the sufferers in the hell of severance. They also, Fields also brings up a bizarre idea that the official position of the Lutheran Church in this world, one of the major Christian denominations, is that severance creates life.
He said the church's stance is that innies are complete individuals with souls that can be judged separately from their outie.
They don't phrase it that way, but that's what happens. They say that a severed individual has his own unique soul, and it has its own unique moral path towards heaven or hell, which means that the church has essentially decided officially, doctrinally, that Lumen can create life, that Lumen is now God, which is a truly bizarre position to take. It seems almost impossible that any religion would ever delegate that authority to a scientific procedure, because they would be removing their own God's power. I was initially hoping that this scene would be kind of cute and fun as a way to contrast with the other stuff that was going on, but it wasn't. There's a lot of weird things going on here. I also did enjoy that Burt was actually framed in front of a fireplace at one point, like he's literally burning in hell. With all the religious talk, I actually began to think of something that St. Augustine said, "Lord, grant me chastity, but not yet." And I began to think the severing process, you wouldn't need to have the forgiveness of sin if you're severed, because you could say to yourself, you could simultaneously be a horrible, evil sinner, like Helena maybe, and Burt possibly is, on the outside, while the good part of you is on the inside racking up brownie points to get into heaven. So this creates some major theological issues that I think would make all churches hostile to them, not willing to accept somehow that, oh, it's okay because your innie is a separate person. That seemed crazy to me. There's also the really eerie prospect that Burt and possibly Fields are still working for Lumen, and this has all been some kind of elaborate trap, because while Irving is away at the dinner party, this is when Drummond takes the opportunity, I think it was Drummond, to break into Irving's apartment with the complete set of keys to Lumen housing that he has. And something I didn't notice until someone pointed out later, because I'd forgotten, where was Radar? We know that Burt has a dog called Radar, and even if somehow you were familiar with this dog, if you rarely come to this house, it's going to bark as soon as you go in. So what was, like, maybe he was tied up outside or something? I don't know. I hope that, Drummond didn't kill Radar somehow, but I feel like they would have shown that if he did it. But where was he? This also gave an opportunity to re-examine that weird list from the season 1 finale that Burt has been creating of all of the severed workers. And there's weird underlines over certain letters, which some people might say that we could, like, an anagram and we could rearrange things or something. Maybe there's some sort of anagram program where you could take a bunch of letters and it'll give you all of the words it could possibly spell. That might be helpful. It's hard to discern what Fields' opinion is here because he's blowing hot and cold. He seems insulted and angry at Irving and Burt for what happened between the two of them. Well, the two of their innies, I guess. He's making insinuations that Burt somehow has done this before, maybe, like he's a serial cheater. And Fields is not that surprised about what happened. But then in other moments, he goes completely the other way. It's 180.
I've been talking to Pastor Gale about this. I believe that Innies deserve to experience love.
Even though I obviously seem and sound angry and say nasty things at times. Like, I don't know where he's going there with that. Fields also drops a bombshell at the dinner that Burt was working for Lumen 20 years ago, which is peculiar because 12 years ago is when Severance was invented. So it's not like he became severed immediately. So he's been working for Lumen 8 years longer at least. And that's when I think that he may have been involved in inventing Severance with Jaime Egan. He also, Fields also mentions an obscure partner of his, which initially I thought was, oh, it was like another cheating situation going on at work. But I began to think maybe not. Maybe by partner he meant Jaime Egan. Maybe these religious notions of finding a way to purify the soul is what inspired Burt and maybe Jaime Egan and others to create Severance in the first place. Oddly enough, Outie Burt is also religious, just like we saw with Innie Burt. So even without experiential memory, Innie Burt turned to religion and began to become obsessed with it. So what exactly does this dualism mean for the human identity? What remains of your own personality when you have no memories? And how can you judge someone's personality based on that? I don't even know. So what remains as part of the self when all of your memories are erased? Are you naturally going to be inclined towards certain things in all instances? Or is it truly based on what you do and see?
Ah, yes. Francis Galton's perennial conundrum, nature versus nurture.
Speak quiet.
Stop it, Colin Robinson!
I know that some people actually get bored at this topic, but if you're interested in Severance, you're probably interested in this topic of nature and nurture. There are all sorts of other weird things that happen in this episode, like the repeated mentions of fatherhood and babies. Helly mentions babies at one point, which may be foreshadowing something. And the Chinese restaurant that Mark goes to and sees Helena, it's actually the Chinese word for father, because one of the things is blanked out at the top. So people are thinking like, does that mean father? That's what I think Gemma was trying to tell him. Your Outie is going to become a father. And as usual, I end these videos thinking they're both too long and I didn't mention nearly enough. Like there's a ton of other little details about things that I didn't go into, like the odd tone, the elevator tone seems to be playing during the reintegration process. So is there some sort of Pavlovian response of the brain when you hear that tone? And as usual, please tell me all of your wackiest theories, everything that you think is going on, what you think I left out. Like, trust me, I'm not just leaving something out because I forgot it, although I'm sure I'm doing that too. I'm more so leaving it out because it would just take hours to go through all of the tiny little details. Like Miss Wong saying that she sees asking Mark if he sees auras or hallucinations, which hints that they may be aware of what reintegration will do to someone, and they're keeping an eye on him about it, may find out that he's trying to reintegrate. But there's so many other things on there. Please tell me your analysis. I want to hear it. And as usual, I am going to end with my craziest theory. This is the wackiest theory I've ever had, and it is almost certainly wrong. But what if the reason that we're in winter is because none of this is real? In reality, a nuclear winter has happened. We are vastly in the future in the 2080s. Like, I think they determined that based on the number of quarters on the board during Irving's funeral. But more and more, I'm beginning to suspect that this isn't the real world. That, I mentioned in episode 4 that there could be like a holodeck or something, but what if the entire town is just some sort of hallucination that people are having, and Lumen is attempting to create some sort of theocratic state somehow in the nuclear remnants of humanity, and they actually have control over everything all the time and are subtly trying to alter people's souls in order to make them more obedient and tame their tempers in order to survive in the hellish post-apocalyptic wasteland. So yeah, that's my craziest theory. I dearly hope that's not true, because that would be a wild twist if that happened. Maybe they're actually setting us up because they know we're going to be suspicious of the Helly pregnancy thing, but in reality, they're just setting that up so they can make a completely different twist that we had no idea was coming. And yeah, my name is Michael. Thank you very much for watching. And remember,